Welcome back, everybody. If you watch my channel, you know how frequently we talk about my portfolio's performance and how much I'm trailing or beating the index in a given month or how much each position has earned. And it's easy to get caught up in the numbers because we're looking at them every day or at least pretty often. But I'm here to tell you that the numbers aren't even close to the most important thing, at least not in the way that you might be thinking. Because I saw this article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday called The Downside of Delayed Gratification, and it really aligned with how I think about money and investing, especially at this stage in my life because of the personal experiences that I've had with it. So in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about that article, go through what it's actually about, and give you a few examples from my own life that kind of shape my perspective on what's actually important when it comes to money and investing. So that way you'll have a better understanding of how and why I approach things the way that I do. But let's start off with going through this article and just seeing what it was really all about. Now, it's obviously called The Downside of Delayed Gratification, and we're all told that it pays to be disciplined in our spending and consumption, but the advice can backfire. So you probably already have an idea of what this is going to be about, but I thought there were some interesting points in here. And so it starts off with, good things come to those who wait, but could there be such a thing as too much waiting? And we hear this type of thing as it relates to money all the time, like don't buy an expensive car, don't spend a lot on a vacation, make your coffee at home, or even as it applies to just investing, stay invested to keep compounding. Don't sell your stocks. Always reinvest your dividends. It's this idea to be frugal, be patient, maximize your overall savings and your total returns. And I would say in general, it's pretty good advice, especially if you're at the stage of life where you're still living paycheck to paycheck, because at that point, you really have to do whatever it takes to get out of that mode. But then as I talk about in this article, there's a potential downside to staying in that mindset a little bit too long. And they go through it as they talk about this wine bottle experiment that they did. In one of our experiments, we had participants imagine buying a bottle of wine. We asked half of them to imagine that they considered opening the bottle one night, but then decided not to, while the other half didn't imagine this scenario. We later asked the participants how special the wine seemed and how likely they would be to open it at the next available occasion. We found that those who had imagined holding off on opening it just once were less likely to open it at the next available chance. And this was because they had started to think that they had been saving the wine, making it more special and more fitting for a fancy occasion. We also asked participants what would seem like the right occasion for the bottle of wine, and while participants who hadn't imagined passing it up gave exceedingly ordinary descriptions like a normal Tuesday night, drinks with friends, those who had imagined passing it up once gave ratcheted up occasions, a birthday dinner, celebrating a promotion, or a first date. All of our participants were imagining the exact same completely ordinary bottle of wine, but the mere act of saying, not now, maybe later, triggered an instinct to keep putting it off and waiting for a better moment. And what I thought was really interesting about this was that line that basically said all of our participants were imagining the exact same bottle of ordinary wine, but our individual perspective on value and frugality was driving when it was appropriate to actually open it, and that was really fascinating to me. As well as the last line where it says, but the mere act of saying, not now, maybe later, triggered an instinct to keep putting it off and waiting for a better moment. And I really think this is one of the more important ideas of this topic. Like, you get into this mode where you're just working, you're starting to invest, maybe you're doing well, and you keep pushing yourself to keep doing better and just holding off on those small things that maybe you want to do because you're making so much progress and you don't want that progress to stop. But one of the things we have to remember is that even though theoretically there may be a better moment in time, time keeps moving no matter what we do. And so there's a lot of value in taking a break every once in a while just to look at what's going on and enjoying the actual moment that you're in, as opposed to just waiting for something potentially down the road. And they talk about that a little more here, where they talk about the endless cycle where once we decide to delay gratification, then it becomes this cycle where we continue doing it over and over again. And when they tie that back to money, I think there was something important here. Like, we understand the impact of reckless spending and not thinking about long-term consequences, but then we don't really think about the impact of constantly delaying gratification and what it does to our lives. And now a few examples that they gave I don't really think are all that good. Like, they talked about how it's like a hoarding mentality and it's more waste for the environment. I think those kind of miss the whole point. But missing out on things that you truly enjoy or experiences that can shape your life, Those are a big deal, at least in my opinion. And they talk about some other things here, like a study who says people won't treat themselves because they feel too constrained, and our willingness to push off spending on good things in our life because it's not the right time. Or we can push a little harder and get there if we just put it off a little bit more. And so one of the reasons that I really like this article is it just kind of reminded me how my thoughts on money and investing have actually changed over time. Because at the beginning, I've kind of shared my story with you guys where, I was broke, I was unemployed, I had no investments, I had no savings, and had a young family. And so my wife and I were just kind of scraping and clawing and doing whatever we could to make ends meet on a month-to-month basis. And at that stage of life, we were trying to be as frugal as we could because it was just necessary. But I think the issue is that we have a tendency to stay in that mindset even after we start doing a little bit better. And that kind of misses the whole point of why we're doing it in the first place. So I have a few short stories from my own life that I want to share with you guys that have kind of molded my opinion in that way. And so story number one actually just happened this past weekend where I helped my mom buy a new car. And the whole thing was she was driving this car that they got in 2011. So it was pretty old and it had some things go wrong with it. She had kept kind of putting the money in to fix it and maintain it. And it finally got to a point where the stuff that was breaking was just not worth to fix anymore. So I did what I normally do. I'm a researcher, you guys know. So I went to Edmunds, I did the car comparison, and I gave her kind of a list of, here's a few cars that you're probably interested based on the stuff she told me. And also we're in kind of this price range that she was okay with spending. So we got her pre-approved so that she could go in there knowing she had funding already and could just pick out whatever she liked and, get a new car. And so we went out to the first place, which was a more high-end vehicle than she was driving. She was driving a Subaru before, which is a really great car, but, more on the practical side. And at first she was kind of looking around, looking at the features, not really sure if she liked it. And we decided to go ahead and do a test drive. And she ended up really liking the car after we did a test drive. The issue was that this car was probably at the top end of what she really wanted to spend. And when you start adding things like tax, title, license, and any extras that happen to fit for her situation, then it starts to get to be just a little bit more than you expect. And, her worry was, yeah, I like this car, but should I really be spending that much? Is it really worth it to spend that much? A lot of what she was worried about wasn't even rational from a financial standpoint. Like she had done really well for herself. Her and my dad together had built a really great life and worked hard their whole lives to get to where they were. And, even in retirement, which she's been retired for a while, she's pretty frugal and she doesn't spend very much. And she goes and she does her thing and she volunteers and she drives all around town. And she's been doing it in this car that's, over 15 years old and it does what she needs and it's no big deal and she hasn't worried about it. And my whole thing to her was, look, you can afford the car. That's not the problem. It's just a matter of if you're comfortable spending that much on a car. And I'm just sitting there like, it's your money. Enjoy it. Like, it's okay. But she was so ingrained in that thought process of, I have to be frugal. I can't spend too much, even though she'd already done that her whole life. And she had built up a nice nest egg that allows her to be comfortable in retirement. So anyway, she got the car. It's a Audi SUV, like a smaller Audi SUV. She loves it. She's driving and zipping around town everywhere doing her thing. And it's great. Like she totally deserves it. She never spends on anything and I'm super happy for her. Now, the second story that I'm going to tell you actually starts kind of at the beginning of that last story. And it has to do with my dad. And I've talked about on my channel before that my dad passed away probably about 12 years ago or so. And it was really amazing to see what him and my mom kind of had built together. And I was very lucky to have them two as my parents because I got to see what, hard work and dedication and just, people who were willing to grind and do better for their family, what it can do, right? Because where they started compared to where they ended up were two very different places. And what always struck me about my dad is that, he worked hard his whole life. He really changed the arc for our family, right? Him and my mom. And the sad part was that, a couple years after he retired, there was, a freak accident and he's gone, right? And one of the things that stuck with me was that here was a guy that worked his whole life to kind of, better his situation and better his family situation. And he achieved that, right? Remarkable accomplishment. But then he didn't really get to enjoy the fruits of his labor for very long because life happens and things happen that you can't predict. And that sucks for all the many reasons why that's a terrible situation. The one that I always thought about was he didn't get to enjoy all the things that he built and all the things that he, worked for. And I know, he would say that that wasn't the point, but me as, his son, I want that for him. I wanted that for him, right? Because he deserved it. And so that really stuck with me. That was something that at that point in time in my life, when all that happened, me and my wife were investing as much as we could. We were putting money away as much as we could, which again, in general is good advice. But it really made me think, like, what are we doing all of this for? Like, yes, we're trying to better our life. We're trying to have a good retirement. We're trying to change kind of our, money situation and, make it better. But ignoring everything that's happening right now is a mistake, right? Obviously, because we don't know how much time we have left. And I didn't want to be in the same situation where we're just grinding, we're working heads down for 30 years. And then we bring our head up for air one day, 30 years from now, and either it's not what we expect or we missed out on a bunch of stuff or, God forbid something happens and one of us isn't there. And it was just a stark reminder to me that money in itself is not the goal. And I think it's easy to confuse that at times because we're so concentrated on it. The amount of money you have is not the goal. The number on a screen is not the goal. Your, percentage portfolio gains is not the goal. Like, money is just a tool. It's a tool that we have to use to live our lives for, better or worse. And the reality is that the more we have of it, then the easier we can make our lives. Or maybe easier is the wrong term, but the more options we have in terms of how we want to live our lives, the more money we have, right? But at the end of the day, money in itself is not the goal, at least not for me. And I think there's a lot to be said for being able to experience the things that you really enjoy, whatever those things are, right? Now, obviously, if you're still living kind of in that paycheck to paycheck mode and you're just trying to get out of that kind of initial stage, then yeah, it's probably not time to, spend recklessly at that point. You have to get out of that stage first. But once you do, I do think there's a lot to be said for ensuring you have some money set aside to go enjoy the time that you have with your family, with your kids, or whatever your situation is. Because it's important to also enjoy your successes as you go instead of waiting for some, number 30 years down the line. And we do this in a lot of ways now, but the last story that I'll tell y'all is when we went to Disney World in 2016. And around that time, my son was a teenager still, and my daughter was not yet 5 probably, but in that range, which was a perfect time to go because she was all into all the Disney princesses. She dressed up all the time. And my son was at an age where he wasn't too old yet. Like, he could still really enjoy it. But obviously this was Disney, and we specifically went to Disney World. We stayed in one of the hotels. We did the meal plan and all that. So it was clearly very expensive. And I think at the time it was probably the most we had ever spent on a trip probably ever. And if you talk about that thing nowadays, what you hear is, oh, if you took that X amount of dollars and you put it into the S&P 500 for 30 years, you'd have $28 bazillion, right? You hear these type of things online all the time. And while those things may be technically correct with math or probabilities, they just kind of totally miss the whole point of what's really important here. I mean, we had some great memories there. We got to watch Cinderella's evil stepsisters fawn over our teenage son, which was actually pretty funny. He enjoyed it, and they were even a little snippy to my wife, like being a little catty to her, which I enjoyed. She probably didn't enjoy that too much. But probably my favorite part was when my daughter got to visit with Rapunzel. And I should tell you, at the time, Rapunzel was her favorite Disney princess because she loved watching Tangled. So we bought her the Rapunzel dress before we left for our trip, and she wore it that day. And when she got to the front of the line to go see Rapunzel, Rapunzel saw her wearing her Rapunzel dress, and she immediately was like, "Oh my goodness, you look just like me." And my daughter's face just lit up. And I know you can't see it in this picture because I'm covering it, but she is just beaming in that picture because there was her favorite Disney princess who acknowledged that she looked just like her, and it was everything she ever wanted. And I know it sounds cliche and probably a little overdramatic, but experiencing that moment as a parent was arguably worth the cost of the whole trip. It was a moment that my daughter, I'm sure she remembers, but probably not all that much, but I do, and it meant a lot to me. Okay, so what's the actual point of all this? We tend to focus a lot on the numbers when it comes to money and investing. Are we beating the market? Are we optimizing returns? Are we saving enough? Are we being frugal enough? And do we understand the power of compounding those $5 a day lattes over 30 years? I mean, look, all those things are fine, and they're good to kind of get an idea of what you should be doing as it relates to money and investing. But to me, they're secondary to the main point. And the main point is that money is just a tool. and it's a tool that we have to use to live our lives. And so being able to learn about money, being able to get better about money is all about increasing our chances of mastering that tool so that we can live a better life with more options and be able to do all the things that we want to do. And to me, it's that simple. It's not about expensive Disney vacations specifically, but it's about being able to create the moments and experiences with the people that you care about. Like, that's what really matters. Now, obviously, when it comes to money investing, it's something that I personally enjoy. I've spent a lot of time over the years digging into it, learning more about it, but it's still all because of what it allows us to experience in our actual lives. So don't worry so much about a specific number or feeling like you have to delay gratification forever to pass some kind of purity test. Find ways to enjoy your progress with the people you care about along the way, because I can make a good investment decision a month from now or a year from now to add more dollars to my bank account, but my daughter's never going to be 4 years old again. So we just have to balance between being responsible and continuing to build wealth, with also being aware that none of us really know how much time we have left anyway. So don't spend the majority of your life worrying about a number on a screen. Now, do you guys have any examples of something that you spent on that was totally worth it? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, if you want to know why investing is so important and the easiest way to get started, click on this video right here. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom, so keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.